Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans Reacts. And on today's episode, we're talking about something that's not as commonly discussed, where an ancient Roman Arch of Constantine was damaged by lightning. It was struck during a recent storm in the city of Rome and had thrown pieces of marble everywhere, which is kind of interesting. And this was a triumphal arch that was built in the 4th century AD to celebrate the victory of Constantine, the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity, which 4th century, 400 years after Jesus. That's a lot of time. and it was to celebrate his victory over his rival Maxentius.
Yeah, Maxentius. Yeah. It was a very decisive victory that he had, and it was really a reunification of the Roman Empire with him, and so it was really a monumental event. And so he built this arch outside of the Colosseum to sort of remind everyone that he's in charge and he is great enough to be worthy of being in charge because civil war and all that stuff.
And
This
oh yeah.
Yeah, like I said, this arch stands at 82 feet high, and it's more or less all marble. And so this, past was it when at the time of this recording, this past week, it got blasted by a thunderstorm, which is both fairly rare and also, the more you think about it, how has this not happened before?
Well, and that's something where I personally thought this was kind of an interesting article to talk about because this is something that actually does and can happen where you have these ancient monuments and structures that are damaged by very modern weather events. And it's something that us in the preservation world and the historian world and everything else have to kind of consider and think about because this is a very real and present danger and threat to a lot of sites, but how do you mitigate it and how do you go from here? And what ended up happening was there was a downburst, which basically was a giant storm that just erupted out of nowhere. And it really impacted the Italian capital city. It threw trees down, branches, flooded several streets, but one of the biggest effects was a lightning strike hit the building and caused chunks and fragments to go flying off. And one of the interesting things that came out were videos of the staff going around picking up all the pieces. And well,
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting scenario here because one, the arch just started undergoing restoration work in like 2 days ago, where before this happened, where they were focusing on the south side of the arch to really restore it and bring it back to life. And now the restoration is going to also include repairing the rocks and fragments, which they believe that they've recovered all of the fragments, which is great. They'll just kind of spend a couple of weeks doing giant Lego pieces and gluing it back together.
Plaster is amazing, people.
But this is genuinely something that happens and that I actually am kind of involved with for work, to give you a little bit behind the scenes, is a lot of natural disasters can really impact historic properties and buildings, and it's something that you both have to have a little foresight with, but a lot of thought into how best to mitigate these issues, how best to account for them, how to improve upon them. Like, you can always go the extreme route of fully enclosing the arch and removing it from its context, but then you remove it from its historic setting. You're not going to really build walls around it. It's hard to protect from lightning. You could potentially install a lightning rod, but like Cullum said, this arch has stood for almost 2,000 years, and this is the first time that it really has been impacted.
Yeah, and the timing is pretty good with the restoration team working on the side that was hit during the incident, because now you don't have to scramble to put together a budget and a plan and personnel to be out there to do the proper recovery work and rehabilitation of the monument. All those people are already there. You just have to extend their timetable.
Well, and the other big issue is funding, but one small benefit to this is if you notice in this image, immediately behind it is the Colosseum. So this is within the main Roman archaeological park that's in the heart of the city. So it is in a place that will have better funding and will have the means available to restore it and to fix it, but this is something that really does happen a lot, and it's rare that it happens to something so monumental, but all the time you see buildings get impacted and damaged. I mean, you walk around, it's not a natural disaster, but you walk around London, you can still see evidence of the Blitz.
Yeah.
You know, there are very real and actual impacts that happen in more modern context to these historic and ancient properties that, you know, it takes a very mindful eye and something to really consider. And this is also one of the reasons why we do our Historical Humans Heritage series, where we go over UNESCO listings and talk about the management practices and all the different laws and executive orders that are in place to try and really mitigate any potential impacts or have management plans in place that maybe not plan for this in particular, but can help institute the right people in the right places to repair and to try and fix what had happened, you know? It just it's kind of sad to see things like this, especially when you see the impacts of the rubble being strewn everywhere. But it does happen. I mean, Rome's Colosseum wasn't one of the walls standing until like 1970 when an earthquake knocked a lot of it down.
Yeah, yeah. Rome's Coliseum has kind of that. I don't know if you can see it in the picture, really,
Almost
but
through the arch, if you look that way, you could see a
yeah,
little bit of it.
yeah. Like where just one of where like just part of the outer ring is just tapers off into the ground, so it kind of has that spiral effect. That's not supposed to be like that.
No, it's supposed to be dual ringed, and the outer wall fell after a massive earthquake hit Rome. And, you know, this is something that you do kind of have to think about. Maybe not specifically lightning, but, you know, you have Pompeii that's right next to Vesuvius. You have, you know, Tokyo that's next to Mount Fuji. You have volcanoes. You have earthquakes. You have seismically active zones that you have to try and both prepare but account for and try and figure out ways to have preservation plans in place that can be quickly enacted should there be a need to work in quick fashion to try and restore.
Yeah, and I will say this was an unprecedented event for the city of Rome. The amount of rainfall they received in this storm was about the equivalent to 1 month's worth in a single, what was it? Yeah, single hour. And it was a very so this was a almost unnaturally violent storm for this region.
It's said to have been similar to the one that sank the billionaire's yacht a few months ago, or a few weeks ago, but it's as much as people don't like talking about it and it's an uncomfortable conversation, our weather is changing. We're getting more severe storms more frequently, and it's very rarely big things like this that are seeing the impacts. A lot of times it's small towns that are just dealing with washouts and floods and, you know, all sorts of just death by a thousand cuts. But I think that's a good point for us to wrap up here. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know what you thought down below, and we'll see you guys in the next one.